My name is Aaron Stritzel. I'm the lead pastor here at One Church, at least for the next 6 weeks or so. If you're new, we are in transition, so welcome to our transitional period. Today, we're going to be exploring transitions. Before we do, just to let you know, One Church is a safe place that reflects the inclusive love of God, so we hope you feel that in some way here this morning. So 2 weeks ago, I announced that I will be stepping down as pastor of One Church at the end of June. And then the board came up and announced that Angie will be stepping into that role, which I'm very excited about. By the way, welcome back, Angie and Talia from Denver. They were there at a conference, She Is Called Conference for Women in Leadership, and also making connections for people at Highlands Church in Denver and Left Hand Church and other people, I'm sure. So I'm excited for them. Welcome back, guys. I hope you had fun. Good time? Good time. So we are a community in transition. And so after that announcement, Angie and I met, and we were like, okay, what do we do now in this in-between time? So we decided to just take it front on and go through a series on transitions. How do we navigate change? And the more we talk, the more we realize that life is just a series of changes. And there's different seasons, and some seasons they change less, but other seasons then all of a sudden bring in new transitions. And so we've been kind of wrestling with what that means. Wherever you are on your journey, I think you can resonate with this idea of transitions and change, and how do we navigate these changes. And as I was thinking about it this morning, 3 things stood out to me that I think all transitions fall into these 3 categories. You can follow along on the slide. Number 1, they're either unexpected things outside of our control. 2, they're expected things that are still difficult. Or 3, they're anticipated things we worked for. So 1, unexpected things outside of our control. Maybe you lose your job. Your boss comes in and says, you're out of here, right? Outside of your control. Now what? Maybe your partner of a relationship or marriage says, I am done. We need to separate outside of your control. That's another transition. Perhaps you get in an accident of some sort or an illness. The doctor diagnoses you of some sort of illness outside of your control. That's a transition. Now you need to navigate that change. Then there's expected things that are still difficult. Maybe you decided to leave your job to get a new job. But that's still a navigating change. You expected it, but it's still different. Now, what do they expect of me? Who are these people? How do I get along with them? Perhaps you were the one that decided that no to a relationship and you cut it off. That's still navigating change. Even though you expected it, it's still a new season. It's still difficult to figure this all out now. Who am I separate from this person? And then lastly, there's anticipated things we worked for, like a new house, a new child, graduation, or relocation of a new job. Today is going to be a little bit different, as it's already different. I feel like I say that every month. Maybe we should. I thought about getting like a sticker or something. One Church, different is the new norm, or something like that. It's like, well, that fits us in multiple different ways right there. But as we are a community wrestling through navigating our own change, today we're going to be wrestling with kind of the future, where we're headed as a community. But as we do, I wanted to invite us to think about Scripture. We're not going to dive into any particular text today or particular story, but we have the sacred text we call the Bible. And in much of the Bible, 2/3 of the Bible is actually what Christians refer to as the Old Testament, and often I refer to it as the Hebrew Scriptures. And in the Hebrew Scriptures, if somebody was going to ask me, how do you summarize all those books in 2 words, I would summarize them the following: Exodus and exile. These are 2 very defining and important transitional times for this group of people that became known as Israel. Now, most Christians today in modern times would know and be aware of Exodus, right? You have Genesis, and then the second book is Exodus. But exile is not something we're near as familiar with. So, really, the Hebrew Scriptures is about a community and how it was formed. The nation of Israel began really with Abram, who is known as Abraham, who journeyed from Ur, and then it continues on until the nation was formed. And we get this group of people that believed that they were the covenant people of the God they worship named Yahweh. And then around the year 587, another nation, the Babylonians, came and conquered the nation of Israel. They destroyed and wiped out their temple and took thousands of people into Babylon to assimilate into their culture. And it was during that time, really, where the Jewish people began to wrestle. We have all these stories, these ancient stories that we pass down orally, but we need to figure out who we are, where we have come from, in order to figure out now, where are we headed? We find ourselves in this transitional moment, right, in exile. What does this mean for us today? How many of you remember 9/11? Remember where you were at 9/11? It's interesting because that's probably one of the most defining markers of our generation in America. Most people remember those moments and where they were and what happened. And we all kind of grieved together as a nation. It was a communal experience. And as we were wrestling with what does this mean, I think as a nation we began to reflect on who are we and where have we come from as we make these choices and journey into the future. It was the same questions that the people of Israel wrestled with over 2,500 years ago. So today, I want to invite us as a community to reflect upon those things, those two questions. Who are we and where have we come from? The first question is really a question on values. Who are we? Last week, Angie talked about identity. This idea that whenever we go through a transition, right, it's almost this identity crisis. Now, who are we? As we're moving from here, as we're graduating medical school, we're moving to Atlanta or Charlotte, who are we, this family together as we move and explore and start this new journey in this new place, continue our journey in a new place? So who are we, our values, and where did we come from? At One Church, we say we're a safe place that reflects the inclusive love of God. And that word safe place is really, really important. Here we have in this room and a part of our community an eclectic group of people. We have former Catholics. We have former evangelicals. Yes, former Southern Baptists and former Mormons. And we love all of them. And yet in this place, we set up a safe place as we explore God and wrestle with questions and faith together. And how we do what we do is just as important as what we do. On the next slide, you'll see our values written up here. And again, this is a time of reflection. What are our values? Who are we and where have we come from? Our values here at One Church are openness, humility, and community. Which says a lot. Just those three words, I think, says a lot about the kind of faith community we are. So one, openness. If you read throughout scriptures, what you'll find is story after story of a person, a small group of people, or a large group of people being called or led by God into something new. Time and time again, Abram leaves his country and journeys into a new place. Moses gets called out and go back to my people. I've heard their cries. Jesus gets called to do something new. The first followers of Jesus are exploring something new, taking this good news, the gospel message, to these new people, the Gentiles, to all parts of the world. So openness is definitely fundamentally a part of what it means to be a person of faith, to be a follower of Jesus. Many of us have come from faith traditions that didn't value openness. That many of us, we come from faith traditions that were somewhat closed-minded, at least to some extent. And I'm careful here because I don't want to speak negatively of any specific faith tradition. But I've heard many of your stories, and it reflects my story, where maybe you were allowed to ask a few questions, but eventually you were told, no, those questions are off limits, or you need to accept the answers that we've always told you. Aren't you done yet? Stop asking those questions. We here at One Church in our community value thoughtful inquiry. Keep asking those questions. Science, archaeology, sociology, all of them, everyday normal people that are just like, how can God be so good and yet send millions of people to be tortured forever? I don't connect those two. Keep asking those questions. We value that openness here. If God wanted a homogenous people, why is there so much diversity in the world? I mean, if God wanted one way, one theology to rule them all, that was lame. That's like, sometimes things come in my head and you're like, oh, let's pretend like that did not happen. Why do we have a Bible? 66 different books, spans over 1,000 years with different perspectives and people and journeys, all combined as if it's to tell us, hey, we're all on this journey trying to figure this thing out. Let's create some openness here, all right? And there's actually strength, I think, in doing that. Humility, because we constantly need to be reminded that we're finite human beings. Humility, I think, is one of the key characteristics of spiritual maturity, no matter what faith tradition you're from. We outwardly and overtly say we value humility because we all bring to the table different perspectives based on our experiences, our backgrounds, the lenses with which we view the world. Openness and humility are also, I think, two characteristics of the followers of Jesus. How do we be open to what God is doing, a new thing, and how do we do this in humility, knowing that we're following something far greater than we are? The Spirit of God is blowing, and we're just trying to throw up a sail, if you will, and catch that wind. And lastly, community. Two separate but important things about community. First of all, this idea we've talked about as one church, that God is community. At the beginning of this year, so more than a few months ago, we went through a sermon series, The Divine Dance, where we wrestled with this idea that the first followers of Jesus understood God as this Greek word, perichoresis, which just means circle dance. I love that idea. This idea that God is this dance, which is a very different idea than this idea of God as this old man in the sky ready to beat you up every time you disobey, get out of line, say a 4-letter word, or whatever it is. The circle dance. It's a beautiful image, and we're invited into that dance. That was probably actually one of my favorite sermon series we've done because at the same time I was also wrestling personally with our own transition at that time and like, oh, there's this dance going on here which is so wonderful, and yet somehow feel kind of called and led out to this other dance and trusting and surrendering that the dance is going on in Seattle as well, and we're being called and invited to participate in that dance there. And I love that image of the dance, and Richard Rohr calls it the flow. So God is community. I came across a quote recently from a contemplative author and teacher, and this is what he wrote. Union with God is not something we acquire by a technique, but the grounding truth of our lives that engenders the very search of God, because God is the ground of our being. The relationship between creature and creator is such that by sheer grace, separation is not possible. God does not know how to be absent. And so that's then simply a response for us. How aware are we of the divine dance going on? It's just a perspective. And all we're doing as we gather together is reminding ourselves of the dance that is going on all over the place. And the second part of the community is creating a community where all kinds and sorts of people can belong. This idea of belonging. And this has been so important for us as a church and as a community, that we create a safe place where people can belong wherever they are on their faith journey. So important. And in fact, you guys have said it better than I could have ever said it. Chrisanna created this short little video, and many of you have seen it before, but I want to invite us to go ahead and watch it. Just 1 minute long, and it's some people from our community reflecting on this idea of belonging. So let's go ahead and watch that together.
The day I walked in, I remember hearing Aaron say, I'm not here to tell you how to love God or how to find God. I'm just here to strengthen your relationship with whoever God is to you. And when he said that, I was just like, this is home. Like, this is where I want to be.
And I just saw within the room what looked like a lot of diversity to me. I'm like, wow, there's a lot of young people, there's like older people. I don't know how to explain it, just felt different.
It's been really freeing for us as parents. We thought we were coming here for our daughter, but what we have gained I mean, my husband and I feel like our relationship with God has just blossomed and expanded in ways we didn't know that it could.
As I've gone through my own journey, I've been unwilling to let go of the fact that coming to church each week reminds me of the type of world we want and the type of person that I want to be. Like, this place values love and community so deeply. And so the wrappings that come on the outside might be a deterrent for some, might be an attraction for others, but I mean, the heart of this community is love, and I think that's beautiful.
If God is love, love demands community, right? Love cannot be isolated in its own silo. And so this idea of community has been one that, how do we intentionally cultivate a place where community is this focus, is central, and this idea of people can belong. And so today, as we have wrestled through who are we as a community, I've invited Tracy, the chair of our board, and Angie, the next pastor of One Church, to come up, and we're going to go through this idea of where have we been as we navigate where are we going. Now, if you're new, let me preface this. Again, this isn't the norm, but we welcome you and invite you to just get a glimpse of who we are as a community. For a lot of churches, this would be sort of an after the church business town hall meeting. And we felt like, we want to invite our people together because this is important for all of us as we navigate where are we headed together. So we felt it was important to do this as a community in church, which is different. I understand that, but because community is so valuable to us. So I invite, do you have a, you do have one right here.
Can you hear me without a mic?
No, we need a mic because we have a live stream over there.
Does that work? All right. So one of the interesting things that we wanted to talk with you about today is the where of our community. The board has been wrestling for some time now with the fact that we're growing. And we're growing very quickly. And I think some of you have heard me say a year ago when we moved into here, signed our lease, we thought, will we make it or not? And now we're sort of busting at the seams. So we want to get some input. We want to share with you where we have been, what we have done, and at the end we're going to ask you for some input. We recognize as a board we have the obligation to make a final decision, but we don't want to do something without input. But we want to share all the work we've done to date, which is a lot of work. And this organization goes back many, many, many years. And so I'd like to call up John Marsh, who actually was one of the original officers 12 years ago when the thought was beginning. And then Chapin, if you could come up too so we can move into the current status when John finishes.
Get that out of your foot.
John, I dig the shorts and flip-flops.
You like that?
Yes, very casual. Now that I pointed
It's
it out.
Arizona.
I'd say
you know,
it is.
It's next to Hawaii, right? Being casual. 12 years ago, I think I had hair then. Yeah, I think the next slide's fine.
Yeah, next slide.
Yeah. So 12 years ago, we started One Church. I think the only other member here is Joe. So we started in a house, and it was a younger church. And when I mean younger, a lot of kind of college, some things. We were in 3 different houses. It was great. It was awesome. A lot of community, a lot of good relationships. And then the founding pastor started dating someone in Ohio and moved back to Ohio, and so we kind of morphed into a homeless ministry, and we carried that mission on as a homeless ministry for several years. And as young people do, there's a lot of people that move away, they get married, relationships, and so kind of went dormant for a couple of years, and then the founding pastor came back, and we relaunched One Church in a theater. And that was in, I think, 2013. I think we had like preview services 2012, and then 2013 we officially launched. And I'll just walk you very quickly through what's on the slide here. We were in a theater for a couple of months and felt like it was better suited. We needed a facility for kids. It was better equipped, so we went to an elementary school. We outgrew that elementary school, and so we had to go to a high school. I think it was Perry High School, for those of you that were with us then out in Gilbert. Then we had a transition from the high school, and we needed to, as churches do, there's ups and downs, and so we needed to find a place a little bit smaller, more suitable for our congregation at the time. So we found Extreme Air Park, and it was a trampoline park. And for those of you that were with us then, thank God we're not in there anymore. I was really tired of smelling feet on Sunday. And so, if you weren't with us, I'm not joking. And we were there for a while. I want to say maybe 18 months or so. Might be off a little bit, but it kind of feels right. And we grew. And growth is the best problem that you can possibly have as a church. And we went from the trampoline park to where we're at now. And to echo what Tracy said, I think we came in and we thought, well, this is great, this is suitable, this is going to be really great, but can we sustain it? And here we are today, right?
Yep, thank you. And so, as we've grown, we decided to take advantage of another board member's skill sets, which Chapin looks at numbers and figures and data, and she has a way, for those of you that are data-driven, to put some of these confusing numbers into trends. And so we asked her to present some trends for you today.
Okay, so as I'm the financial secretary, and part of that role is to take attendance, but then also record it. So you see me in the back, just kind of going like that, I'm counting. So if we can go to the next slide. So this is our attendance over the last 2 years. I've only gone back 2 years just because I feel like it's the most relevant. And this is attendance within the worship service itself. This does not include our kids ministry or the volunteers that help out there. It's just within the service itself. So if you can kind of see, back in 2016, we're kind of on the lower end, and now it's a pretty steady increase. And so in 2016, we were averaging around 75 people per service. In 2017, that went to 100. And since the start of the year, our average is around 125. However, you can kind of see the last month, we've probably are averaging closer to 140, which if anything in this space, our max is around 130. So we're clearly growing out of this. So if we go to the next slide, this is our kids attendance. As you can see, it kind of follows the same pattern as our main worship service, that it's an increase from 2016 through now. Probably not as big of an increase, but it is an increase. 2016 and 2017, our average around 18 kids per service. And then in 2018, we've done around 24. However, in 2016, the average was probably closer to around 12 to 13. We did have a couple big spikes. One of them you can see close to 50 kids. That was when we were back in the air park, and we had a day where all the kids could jump on the trampolines. So most of them brought friends. So
everyone came out of the woodwork for that.
Yeah. So that skewed that one a little bit. But both of these are kids' attendance as well as this main worship service. We're definitely growing, and the trend is still continuing to grow week on week. So.
We go to the next slide.
Okay, so thank you for that, Chapin. I appreciate that. I would too come to a time to jump on the trampoline, but I wasn't invited. So our current challenges, you can see this as we are in this room. We are as close to the stage as we possibly can get with this front row, and we're all the way to the very, very back. And then there's some of you that are watching right now in a different room, and there's some of you that stayed home because it's too uncomfortable for you to be here because it's too crammed. So the capacity of the worship space, we are beyond that. They say the rule is to fill up about 80% of a room. We have gone over 100%. This matters for many, 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 many reasons. First, logistical things, right? We see parking, capacity of kids' space. It's all of those, but then there's the things we don't see that are important, like people that have anxiety, people that feel too squished. When you're new and you want to bring your family and you find there's not a seat for you, you start to go, I don't know that I want to come back. So if you're a new visitor, you find there's not room for me. These people are great. There's no room for me to grow with them. So we've been realizing how many people probably leave because they don't feel there's space, and how many of you wonderful people feel anxious because there's also not enough space for you and your energy. So these are some of the current challenges we've been facing. We've been parking across the street, a few of us, and you probably have been made aware of this. We have overflow parking over there. We have overflow in the next room. We're running out of room, even for our kids. We tend to think this is the only problem. We're also running out of room to contain all of the children. What do we do with all of the kids? So we're thinking about this. We've been thinking about this for a while. And obviously this is no surprise to you because you've been seeing this happen. You've been seeing this growth. You've been seeing this expansive change. Do you want to go to that next slide?
Yeah, I'll do the next slide.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. So timing is very interesting right now because we are at the end of our lease here. And we're sort of on a month-to-month basis, if you will. And they have presented us with an option to stay for another year, but the rent goes up $800 per month to $3,000, and we have to lock in for a year. And so that then raised all sorts of challenges, such as, what does that mean? And when we talked with some of you last time about the budget, we had that session in here after church about the budget and planning, many of you said, gee, if you go to 2 services, we are concerned that will split our community in 2, and we've had bad experiences other places. So we have thought about 2 services, and we looked at that, and we also thought about, what does that mean? Double volunteers? Do we burn out people faster? And there's a lot of logistical issues with that. And so we leaned once again, as we have so many times in the past, on Joe, who is an expert in real estate and who has been with us since the beginning. And Joe, can you walk us through some of the alternatives? We're going to move to the slide that gives the list of places that Joe has looked at over the years with us.
So this process actually began probably about 8 to 10 months ago. We knew that we were growing, so as a board, we started looking at potential options. One of the options we looked at were actual Jewish temples, since they typically meet on Saturdays and not on Sundays. From what we were able to find, either some of these temples were smaller in capacity, or they were just very expensive. And just out of our budget. We looked at other Seventh-day Adventist locations as well, but they're typically smaller facilities, so again, it didn't quite meet what we were looking for. With my real estate background, and I don't know if anyone here is in commercial real estate at all, but I investigated and looked at industrial space as well as retail space. Problem with industrial space is, even though it's more affordable than retail space, there's not enough parking. So parking becomes a huge issue. With retail space, we're looking at another cost. It's just very cost prohibitive. When you're looking at space that costs anywhere from $18 a square foot, just for a little 12 by 12 piece of land for a year, and a church of our size needs probably closer to 5,000 square feet, you can see how quickly and how expensive that gets. That does not even include what is called triple nets, which then is you're going to pay your prorated share of expenses for that retail center. So it just completely blows that option out of the water. I think also when you look at industrial and retail spaces, and even if you look at even extreme air, you don't see that dynamic that we have here today. We have people who congregate for 20 to 30 minutes after church. We never had that in any of our other locations, and I think it's just because of the ambiance that this space has provided. And I think most church spaces do provide. We just didn't have that at Extreme Air, or as we were looking at these retail and industrial spaces, just didn't have that feel. The last option we looked at was going back to another school. So I looked into both Kyrene School District as well as Tempe Union, because we also wanted to kind of be more centralized in location. As a board, as we discussed this, budget-wise, it seemed to work. But then it brought more concerns about how much stress does that put on the volunteers. I can tell you, and I know Ron can tell you, there were many, many years where in August and July, we would pack up for an hour after church, and it just weighed on our volunteers after a while. And we felt as a board that it was just probably too much to ask for. So with that being said,
we did find, well, sorry about that. We did continue the search. We looked at some other churches. We ruled them out for one reason or another, except for one. And we'd like to show you that now.
Sure. Can we start with, there is, I think, a Google Earth video. We'll start with that. Yay.
We are modern.
Okay, so here's a look at where we are, that red dot, and the new location, which is 11 minutes apart. Now, once this ends, if we can go right into the next video, we want to actually give you a look at what we have found at Mission del Sol Presbyterian. And we will walk you through what this looks like. This was our experience visiting the space. This is outside. Everything is wonderfully labeled. You can see. And we also have photos, so after this video is over, we have photos. I'll walk you through each space individually. This was when our team went and looked at the space, and they're all talking and deliberating what this might look like for us. I want you to know that we actually literally sat in the chairs, sat in the pews, opened every door, went to the restrooms. We tried to envision, what does life look like there? What does our community look like there? This is a really great space for the kids. This would also be the children's area. Once again, I'll walk you through this a little bit more after this is over.
Sold.
For those of you that don't know what this is a labyrinth. And that's actually a really great practice for contemplative prayer, mindfulness. Okay, so we'll walk you through this space. Now, first, some of you may have noticed, straight out the gate, it's a little more traditional. It does have pews. And for those of you that do not like pews, you are not alone. I think I was among the minority that did not like pews. But you know what? This is a new space with a completely different feeling. And I sat in them, and I pictured what would it be like to sit in this space amongst these people. And I'll tell you what, it changes the idea I have of pews. Because I no longer think of me sitting with my old church and my old baggage, but I sit with you. And that really changed my perspective. I thought, I'm with you. The pew is really, I want to pause on this. A pew, it has a lot of emotional and psychological baggage because they're designed to be immobile. That's the way they're created. They're usually typically wood, they're drilled into the floor, they cannot move. For a lot of us, that has actually been baggage, because it shows that our faith and our faith cannot be moved, and in a negative way. It's certain, it's drilled in, and it cannot expand. The thing that I love is that we'd be coming full circle into a space that has this immovable thing, and yet we are movable, and we are expansive. So for me, that was something that was beautiful and wonderful. Let's carry on, and I'll stop sermonizing. So here's another space. It's actually quite large. The space holds about roughly 350 capacity. So this is one of the most important things for us straight out the gate, is we see, as Chapin pointed out, the trajectory of the numbers. No one knows the future. We cannot predict what will happen, but we all here sense this energy, this urgency, that something is growing and happening here. We can feel that. And it's better for us to be thinking forward ahead of how do we get there. We know that it's not smart for us to pick a building that holds 200. We're already almost there. We would have to be having this discussion in another year. We want to be thinking forward thinking. So the sanctuary holds about 350. You can go along to the next slide. You can keep on going. And these are just different perspectives, different views. This is a view from the sanctuary out. It's quite a beautiful space. The ceiling is amazing. Next space. This is from the outside perspective. And when you walk in, I'm not sure if there's a picture of it later, but when you walk in, there's actually a nice entry space, which is something I talked about loosely, and little did I know it would tie in, that we don't have that here. So we don't have that liminal space to take us from normal life to now we're in this doing life together space. This is a beautiful courtyard. It has really beautiful manzanita and palo santo trees, and it's stunning. I loved it. Lots of shade, so that's helpful too. Come summer, we'll need that. We'll carry on to the next slide. This is another fantastic building for us. I think this was another giant selling point. This is the food hall, and it seats more than 200 people. The thing that is great is we have what we consider a food hall here, and it's rather small. And this allows us to have events, to have meals, to do life together in a deeper way. Susie, you can just keep going, and I'll chat along as we proceed, and if I need you to stop, I'll tell you. So again, this is the food hall from the outside perspective. The kitchen, I will say the kitchen's a bit of a downgrade, but we can overlook that. It's fine. The kitchen, here's the perk about the kitchen, though. What you guys don't know is here we have to literally take all of our stuff from the kitchen and store it. And then every Sunday we wheel it out, we set everything up, and it takes so much time. And they're willing to give us cabinets, refrigerator space, and to literally call this place home and to store our stuff there. And that to us meant more than the nicest facilities possible. It was like we get to actually call this home. This is one of our children's rooms, and we actually have 3 kids' rooms. I shouldn't say we, it could be we, but they have kids' rooms for children's ministry. And this is great too, because if you know that the building could seat 350, we have to then plan for however many children that brings. With church growth brings children's ministry growth, as it should. And that, I think, is such a good sign of a healthy, thriving church community. So with this also, we also have the great gift of storage, of being able to call this place home. It sounds silly to some of you, but behind the scenes, we have to pack up everything. Every Sunday, we see Jody Chester and her volunteers pack everything up. They're out there sweating in the courtyard, packing everything up, putting it in bins, and then we have to wheel it off somewhere. Here we get a space that we can just say, this is ours. This is for our children. This is an outdoor recreation area, which is great. There's a swing set, a couple different things for the kids to play on, and a grass field. And it's a fenced-in, gated area, which is really great, too. A little playground for the kids to be. There's Chester playing, I think, with Elmo, as Chester does. Oh. This is a mess. It's one of the storage areas. This will be cleaned out for us, but we wanted to showcase this because, again, As you know, storage and ample storage is a theme at this new space. We haven't had that. We actually currently pay for a storage unit because we have so much stuff, we don't know where to put it all. So if it's not staying somewhere here in a storage space, it's going to a storage unit. And we haven't had a place to just call our own. This, Aaron said, sold. I agree. If any of you have ever walked a labyrinth, it can be one of the most peaceful and healing things ever. I love the idea that this could be literally right out the front door to join in and do as a community or on our own. It's aesthetically pleasing. That I think is important for visitors. Someone that's in design, I instantly notice that, and I know a lot of people do. They notice that. And then this is the outside view of the space. So it's beautiful. It's got shade. The other thing I want to mention that's so important, Joe mentioned something, and I appreciate that he said this, that what happens at this space didn't happen at the previous spaces because we didn't have a place to build community. So at Extreme Air, you just went straight from the building straight to your car. There was not this communal bonding. And I think that's what's built this community and made it so strong, is we've had this time to mingle and be and create connections. This place has so much of that. In addition, it has more time. So here we're on a very strict allotted amount of time. And you'll notice, we don't mean to be rude, but you'll notice some people go, excuse me, can you move? We have to move chairs, we have to move the stage. And it's because we're on a very strict time crunch to be out of here. This space allows us for much longer time periods, before and after. So we could have shared meals together, shared events, bonding, and connections with one another.
So here's the challenge. It's not available to us on Sundays. You know, they have a church, right? They have several hundred people coming there on Sundays. But they'll make it available to us Saturdays, including Saturday evenings, Saturday nights, as long as we leave it clean in the morning. From an economic point of view, they'll ramp up, they're looking for like 3 years, but we would ramp up lower than we would have here. And basically over a 3-year period, it averages about the same. And we can get out if it doesn't quite work out. What I found personally, I don't know, amazing or whatever you want to say, is I met individually with the pastor on my own. And he's interim. They're on their 8th interim pastor. They had one for a long time who retired, and they've been searching. He's been here for a while. And he wanted to hear about one church, and I told him all about us. I went through the same things that Aaron gave today, and he smiled at the end and said, you know, if you had told me you were closed and you were like any of the other kind of traditional churches we've talked to, I'd have to say no. But I'm overly joyful that you are out there and you're doing what you're doing. And I hope that between both of our churches, namely one here on Saturdays and one on Sundays, it almost is like a sacred kind of place where those in need can be at any time and for any format. So, but that's the challenge, right? Because so many people are used to Sundays. We've done research on churches that have gone to Saturdays. The data is a little bit mixed, but there tends to be a growth pattern happening in Saturdays. But we didn't want to do that without input from all of you. We think it has a lot of potential, but it's unusual. It's different. But then again, one church is different, right? So, but Aaron's done a lot of thought about this too. So,
yeah, when it comes to numbers, that's always it's a trigger for me. I think it's a trigger for a lot of people, and I think it's important because no one here is aiming for a certain number. I've been a part of those organizations where it's like, oh, we need to reach 500, or we need to reach 1,000. We need to have this big service, and no one here is doing that. But we are feeling like, how do we create this safe place and cultivate community the best way we can? And so in trying to discern where we go, we've explored all kinds of different options. In the midst of me transitioning as well, how do we continue to cultivate this community? Because it has been you all who have been doing the work. And so finding a place on a Saturday evening, as Tracy said, would be a massive change. Most people are used to going to church on Sunday mornings. Some people offer a Saturday night service, but it would be different for a whole church to go on a Saturday night service. We'd be looking at doing service from like 5 to 6:15. After a lot of family events will be done, so we have our kids in soccer. They're usually over at 4 at the latest. So there's all of that too that would happen before. So we'd have time together, and then dinners after, celebrating after, and then Sundays, you could do whatever you want on Sundays. Hang out, go out brunch, go hang out, have fun, and do that sort of thing. So we understand. A big part of the reason why we're talking up front here is because I'm leaving, there's that transition. And then this is another big transition. But we have to figure out something together that works for all of us and that continues to build community. Because what I think, and Angie and I have talked about it, what we don't want to do, and we've kind of sensed has happened a little bit, is you don't want to take positive energy and sort of put a lid on it. And only so many people can fit in here. But where do people go? If there was another family of 5 or 6 people and they walked in, where are they going to sit right now? So we have to do something. And so we want your input because it has been such a communal-driven church, not a pastor-driven church. It's about the community. So we wanted some feedback. And we understand it's a little bit of a risk doing this on a Sunday morning, but we wanted to get your guys' input.
And we have all the board members are here and able to talk. If you have any questions, we're going to do a little survey, which you can do online. And we're going to bring up a place you can go on your cell phones and take a survey for us, a couple of questions. If you don't have the mobile device and you want to do it on paper, we have a bunch of paper copies of the same question, which we can pass around. We'd like to collect your input. It helps inform us of a decision. I think we have the input. Do we, Jackie? Okay. So this is just to tell you, I have no idea this is going to come out. So, oh, look at that. All right. That's a pretty overwhelming statement. Pretty overwhelming, yeah.
I just want to address one thing that I've heard mentioned so many times. Amidst the logistics and the processing, we've been thinking wholeheartedly about the community. And I agree, it doesn't make sense logistically. It's poor timing. Trust me, I've been terrified knowing, oh, I'm the one that's walking into this. This is not how I wanted things to go, but this is where we're at. And the thing that I'm hearing again and again is this is why 97 verses 2, and I don't want to say verses, this is opinions and thoughts. This is why 97, sorry, not 2, our voting probably for that is it's about the community. And I know that this means challenges for some of you, and change isn't easy. Change is difficult. And I know some of you may work Saturdays, and you're going, how am I going to make this happen? And some of you may have childcare that you can't figure out. And there's the ritual and tradition of, but I wake up on Sunday morning, and I go to church. And it's challenging for me because I was a pastor's kid. I literally probably cut my teeth on pews. I mean, I have been in church my whole life, and it's always Sunday, 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 Sunday. I, too, am reframing this language, and I'm just going, okay, so now we have a new way of doing things, but the thing we're doing stays the same. The when and where change. The thing we do stays the same. And that's the thing I want all of us to remember in this process of growth and change, that what we do stays the same. And that's why you have Joe getting choked up and me trying not to bawl my eyes out. Because it's not lost on me that pastor then made a decision that allows me to be where I am. And this is why we are who we are. And this is why we take time to make these hard decisions and move forward as a community, and to allow and welcome others to join our community. It's important. Growth is not about numbers for us. Growth is about who else needs love and kindness. Who else has been pushed to the marginalized? Who else? Who else? And that means we might have to sacrifice our times, our schedules. That means we might have to go, but my Sunday morning, it's hard. It's hard for us all. Me too. But if we can lean in and go, how can we make this work so we can share? So we can share this and pour out to others that need this love. And I'll leave it with that.